Okay, good morning. Thank you all for joining us for today's coffee talk. My name's Sean O'Brien, and I'm pleased as always to be joined by Steve Huntington and Jason Heinrich. Steve, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for joining us this morning, everybody. My name is Steve Huntington. I've been working with Sean and Jason and Quick Rate here for a little over a decade now. But my background is I've spent my entire career working with community financial institutions on everything from strategic planning and valuation to M&A and capital advisory and model design and a little bit of everything else.
Great. Jason, take it away.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, glad to be here. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm on the sales team and also do a little bit of the service. So talked to a lot of you already, probably on CECL, and yeah, we're here. So
well said, Jason. Well said. Okay, so a couple of things, just housekeeping. We'll be sending out a copy of today's presentation with a copy of the slides, as well as the link to the audio. We have put together some policy templates that I know in our earlier call this morning, we had a number of requests for that. So we'll attach those to this presentation or the email that comes up afterwards as well. To communicate with us today during the coffee talk, as you know, just click on that Q&A box of the chat. We'll be monitoring that as we move forward. And then we do have a number of topics that we'll address as well. So, as Jason mentioned, we're here, right? We're at that early stage of transition. We're going to be finishing up the 12/31 numbers with the ALLL and then running a parallel comparison. But again, the idea of these coffee talks will evolve and continue to evolve over this year, where we're really more focused on making sure this transition goes smoothly for you. And then throughout the year, obviously, with your input, we'll make improvements to our tool, share with you best practice and things we're hearing. Again, do our best to source out as much industry information about what's happening. And again, just try to, in the best way possible, be a resource for you as you move forward with the CECL, allowance for credit losses, as it'll be referred to here moving forward. So as we've made a number of enhancements and updates to the tool, we're going to focus or talk about a lot of those today. And then, like I said, certainly monitor for questions as we have one right out of the gate. So I think Jason's is addressing that, but the question is, I noticed that I was able to begin my CECL calculation from 12/31/22 data yesterday instead of waiting. Is that a new innovation? Really, yeah, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah. So once you file your call report, even if all your peers haven't finished filing yet, which is probably what the case is here, on the summary tab where we have the current loan balances, if you filed your call report, it's picking up those the fact that you filed it, and it's updating the current balances. So for that final CECL calculation, right? Once you've calculated your lifetime historical loss rate, you've made your Q factor adjustments, you have an expected future loss rate, we apply that to your current balance. As soon as you file your call report, any new scenario you build will be updated with that. Obviously, all the peer data will push forward next week once everyone finishes filing. But for your final calculation based upon your balance data, if you filed before, then they update right away.
Thank you, Steve. So again, we'll touch on a number of these topics listed here. Steve and Jason, any comments before we get into the screenshots about any of these in particular?
I don't have any right off the bat. We're gonna dig into a couple of these guys as we move through today. So why don't we just go ahead and get
all right, off we go. So some of the topics that we wanted to address this month are a little bit of a I don't want to say rehashing, but just reiterating, some of the information that Paul Allen from Saltmarsh shared with us last month, in particular, right? That on day one accounting, if you will, right, really just relax. But the idea is that the ALLL is still the reserve methodology, the standard as of the end of the year. And so you want to continue to close out 2022 utilizing that analogy or that standard. But what you also want to do is run the 12/31/22 numbers with your CECL tool and determine whether there's a difference that needs to be booked. Steve, anything you want to jump in, or Jason, on this?
No, that's exactly right. You know, for although everything was effective, the new standard was effective January 1st. There's nothing really to be done on January 1st for CECL. January is about focusing on closing out the books from last year. Last year, everything was all still your old methodology, your ALLL. So that's the first focus. Until that's done, that's when you turn your focus to doing that initial ACL or CECL calculation. And then at some point, you know, whether it's whether you've just finished it or whether you're in February or March, sometime during this first quarter, you will, you'll make that day one adjustment and backdate it so it's as effective as of January 1st. And of course, that day one calculation is a balance sheet only transaction, right? If you're over reserved, you take money from the reserve and directly into undivided profits or retained earnings. If under reserved, the other way around. Once you make that initial adjustment, from that point on, your reserve is a CECL appropriate ACL, right? And then money flows exactly as it always has, with charge-offs and recoveries coming from the reserve, and then to fill the bucket back up, we use provisions on the income statement exactly like we have in the past. So the accounting on a day-to-day basis after you make your initial adjustment looks just like it always has.
Yeah, and again, I think well said, Steve. So the next topic, or Jason, anything you wanted to add there from your conversations with
that's
the credit?
good. Yeah, just starting to cues off as to see who's started it, who's
yeah. So monitor the chat. Jason is getting conversations going and questions asked. So certainly encouraged.
A lot of calculations. Everyone's getting ready to do that. You know, that adjustment. Looks like a couple folks have to. So yeah, that's what I expected. Everyone's about there, right? So,
yeah, and we have a handful of credit unions who don't have their fiscal year end date is not 12/31, and they have a little bit of extra time during this year to see they don't have to be one of the guinea pigs, which is nice. And any feedback that we get along that process, as we see people making the adjustments and getting those first exams and audits in a CECL world, we'll be sharing all that feedback and talking about that on our coffee talks that continue throughout this year. So anyone who does have that little bit extra time, can come back, keep coming to the coffee talks and keep hearing how it's going.
Absolutely. So next up is, again, do I need a new policy? So, I think a couple things here, right? Obviously, it's not something you need today, but certainly want to get in place. As we discussed on last month's coffee talk, when it comes to policies, every institution's a little bit different. I'm kind of a simple-minded person, so I always try to keep it pretty basic. I think that's what Paul Allen from Saltmarsh suggested as well, because these tend to be kind of living documents that, whether it's your internal team, whether it's an auditor, whether it's a regulator, they may have suggestions. So it does give an opportunity for people to, to give you feedback that you can take without much difficulty and update. To that point, though, we had a large number of our users ask us about help with a policy. And so while it took us a little bit longer than probably any of us would have liked, it is a little bit out of our typical area of focus. We did put together a couple of templates that you can use and customize, edit, use however you'd like. But we tried to take the sentiments that Paul had, my experience as a director in a financial institution, and kind of give you a couple of ways to move from a blank white sheet of paper to something that you could incorporate and make your own. So as I mentioned, you can certainly ask Jason or David for those. We will, for those who are here and registered today, include that with the email that will go out with the slides and the recording, so you can look for that. But again, I think your policy just kind of, reflects your culture. And so again, we just tried to hit some of the high points to get it started. Jason or Steve, anything you guys want to add there?
No, hey, just pick one, start it up, and hold on to that until you feel like you need to make some tweaks to it. So
yeah. So again, let me just monitor. So there's a question about posting an adjustment as of 12/31/22. So you do actually want to make that, well, and I think typically the idea was to make that as of January 1. If you've updated it to be an earlier filer, I think that would be okay. But I think technically that adjustment, you really wanted it to be as of January 1st.
I think if you go early, you lose that day one adjustment, right?
Yeah. So that, I would say,
well, you have to formally adopt the CECL standard, and that adoption for most of us is as of January 1st. So your 12/31 call report loan loss reserve, unless you have adopted early, should still be based upon the old methodology. But that's the same date at which you will do your first CECL calculation.
Right.
So when you if you have, let's say you have in 12/31, you have a $2 million reserve under the old methodology. You put that in your call report January 1st, as of January 1st, sometime this month or next month, you do your CECL calculation. As of that date, let's say it's 2.5 million. Then on your first call report, on your March 31st call report, you'll have a $500,000 transfer from retained earnings to loan loss reserve to make your reserve CECL appropriate. And so on March 31st, you'll see the reserve go from 2 to 2.5 million on the call report. From then on, everything works with the income statement as it always has.
Yeah. Jason, anything you want to add there?
No, but we had a comment here from Lincoln FCU said, hey, they're told by their examiners they need to run the model to coincide with how they pay dividends monthly. And said they needed to run the CECLSolver monthly, and you can, right?
Yeah.
As of date, you can run that as of any point in time. So
yep.
Yeah.
You certainly can run it on a monthly basis. There's not going to be one good thing about CECL in general is I feel like there's going to be less changes. There should be less swings in reserve over time, because we're taking a longer term approach to our historical trends and a longer term approach to our forward looking projections. And so that should smooth out jumps and spikes in reserves over time. The reason I bring this up is the more frequent you do it, the less changes you're going to have as well. So if you're doing it on a monthly basis, the amount of work you need to do should be significantly less, right? You're not going to have an entire new amount of peer data on a monthly basis, because we only get that quarterly. So if you're doing it on a monthly basis, it'll be a smaller job each month. You're going to go revisit your qualitative factor adjustments to see if anything in the environment has changed or anything internally has changed as far as your outlook. You'll update your current balances to reflect the most recent month, right? So that you're doing your final calculation on your actual balance, not an older balance, and a couple other things. So it's very manageable to do the process on a monthly basis if you need to, and it's not triple the work to do it monthly versus quarterly. It's a little bit more, but not that much.
Say, give us a holler too. We'd be more than happy to walk you through that if you need.
Sure.
Yeah. Just a reminder, again, really the fundamental difference in moving from the ALLL to CECL is really about how we think about the loss calculation, right? It's why we have, or particularly I've said tongue in cheek, we're playing the same game with a new set of rules, right? In the ALLL, we tended to focus on annual or annualized loss ratios. In CECL, we're aggregating over a longer period of time as opposed to a single year. So it's almost by definition more conservative. And so again, just not to get too into the weeds about how the calculation works, which we are going to talk about, this really is the fundamental difference about what we're moving from and to. Again, Steve, Jason, anything you guys want to add there?
Nope.
Yeah, good deal.
We're gonna dig
All right,
into that
so
right now.
Yeah, as I say, to that point, we're going to get into the calculation. So one of the things that we are asked a lot, and we have tried now to make more available to you, is just how we calculate. Steve, I assume you want the screen.
Yeah, yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
And so while Steve's pulling up his screen, so many of you have asked, how do we calculate the net charge-offs and just some of the numbers in our tool? So what Steve's going to show you, in fact, is an example of how you can see how we calculate the numbers, and then also show you in the future moving forward how you can see your data to be able to manually recalculate or simulate what the tool is doing. So Steve, I can see your screen. Take it away.
Excellent. So this is just a live version of our tool with a large credit union out of Wisconsin, I believe, that I'm using as my guinea pig for today. So we get questions, especially now that a lot of you are in that kind of neck deep in the nitty gritty of doing those initial calculations and looking more carefully at where some of our historical loss calculations are coming from, trying to verify them and audit some of those calculations. And so the first thing that we did was give you the ability to download right here a detailed historical data. So this is kind of like a data dump with it's your entire historical record of balances, charge-offs, recoveries by quarter. So every single quarter going all the way back gives you all the information that you would ever need to completely recreate down to the penny each one of these lifetime loss calculations. But let's take a step back and just see where that's coming from. Let's say if we're looking at new vehicle loans, right? And you calculated a WARM of 3 years for your new vehicle loans. For this particular credit union, they have a 3-year aggregate loss rate or a lifetime loss rate of 25 basis points. So obviously a ton of math goes into that number. Most of the math can be found right here on the historical analysis tab. This is where we see all those balances changing over time. So we can go back in time and we can look, all right, for the new vehicles, I can see what my balances have been like. Then we have all of the legacy, sort of the older segmentation, balance or charge off and recovery and net charge off values. And then what it amounts to, the most important information to be looking at is the combined segmentation, the historical loss rate. So for new vehicle loans, we can see these annual values, and then we can see the lifetime loss rate of 25 basis points. So the reason we chose to show annualized columns was simply because it was going to be a little bit overwhelming to have quarterly data right here on this interactive page. We'd have 60 columns and you'd be scrolling left and right forever. You wouldn't be able to print it out or PDF it or anything else. But we get users now who are saying, I'm here, I'm trying to audit, trying to recreate that exact 25 basis points to the penny. I can't get it just by adding these values together. And that's correct. You can see the long-term trends here, but you're not getting each individual quarterly piece of data that would allow you to perfectly recreate this entire value. You can get the gist of it from here. Where you get the full data for it is where I just showed you. If I go to export and I click on this, what we're going to get, and I took the liberty of doing so before the call today, you get this. This is every quarter going all the way back to 2008 or something like that, and all the way forward. And we see what these loss rates were for each quarter historically. We can also go to the balances and we can see and track your balances every single quarter going all the way back. So if you want to recreate it, you can use the data to do it. Let me show you how you do that. The other tool that we have in our CECLSolver resources is what we call historical lifetime loss rate sample calc. So this shows you how to take that data, the quarterly data, and come to an exact replica of the lifetime loss rate. And that file is also showing up on another window. Here we go. So this is that quarterly data I was just showing you. And this is how you calculate the quarterly net charge off. And this is how you would calculate the aggregate loss rate or a lifetime loss rate. Let's say you had a 3-year WARM, a 3-year look back period. We're going to take these quarterly net charge off ratios going back 12 quarters or 3 years and simply add them all up and then divide by 4. The reason we're dividing by 4 is just because when you calculate a net charge off ratio for a quarter, just like ROA, right? We annualize those ratios. So your ROA for a quarter is your net income for the quarter to multiplied by 4 to annualize it and then divided by the average assets. Same thing with a net charge-off ratio. You take your net charge-offs for the quarter, multiply them by 4 to make them annualized, and then divide it by the balance. That'll give you a quarterly net charge-off ratio, as you can see right here. If we're calculating a lifetime one, we're going to add up all those quarterly ones, but then divide it by 4 so we don't have some sort of, to make the math work properly. And that's how you would do it. If you wanted a longer look back period, you simply add some more of the quarterly ones together. And so that allows you to perfectly recreate any historical lifetime loss rate in our tool from the quarterly data and then this little bit of math. Sean?
Yeah, that's helpful, Stephen. Like I said, what we're trying to do is just give you the ability to, kind of take the steps that, we're doing in the tool and trying to make easier for you. And as Steve pointed out, save you from the overwhelming amount of data that would be involved in it, but actually allow you, if asked, to be able to replicate a calculation of how the tool actually works. Bill, thank you for the comment. Go Irish.
Go Irish. Let's slow down a second there. You just borrowed our quarterback. I went to Wake Forest University, and you literally
Yes.
just stole our 7th year senior. I don't know. He's like my age.
That is exactly right.
Yeah,
And we're looking forward to it already, Steve.
I'm sure you are.
So a question came up: if we're running the model quarterly, we should be looking at our Q factors and a true up to our ALLL balances monthly. So again, I think this is really up to you. I mean, I think every institution's differently. I think for most institutions that are looking at their analysis quarterly, that's sufficient. We have others who want to budget for those things monthly, then certainly you could be running it every month. I think that's just a individual institution decision. Jason, Steve, anything you guys want to add there?
No, I mean it's all iterative over time. So you can take, right? Yeah, you can take last quarters and last months and then open up that old scenario, update it with anything that's changed over the last 30 days, your balances, any adjustments to Q factors, and then look and see if there's if it's quarter end, you also get all the new peer data, loss trends, right? And there's more economic data, more things happen, more new data is presented and available on a quarterly basis. But certainly you can incrementally go update it for the month, save it as a new scenario with the new month, and then every third time you do that, your analysis will be a little bit more detailed because you'll have more information to consider in updating it. And then the other two off quarter months, if you know what I mean, it's just a little bit of a simpler process, but sure, certainly can be done that way.
So if you're just running that month or quarterly, then you would just get your reserve number, and then the months in between to the next quarter, you would just maintain that level of reserve and then reevaluate at the next quarter then?
Yes.
Let's say light loss history, probably not much.
Yeah, I mean, and to that end, right? I mean, some institutions will just make a budgeted forecast to their reserve on a monthly basis, and then each quarter true that up, right? So it's really kind of a function of how you want to handle it. Like I know the institution where our board is, right? We, based on where we see our reserve, we do have at times have a monthly accrual, and then we do the true up at the quarter, taking those into account just to smooth out the accounting. But some go at point to point, right? It's really everybody kind of handles it however they tend to do it.
Yep.
But there's always that quarterly true up. Just a reminder that sample calculation is available under the resources tab. We did have a question on the start and end date quarter, Steve. So maybe we could just touch on that a second, what that is. And again, we make a default assumption to always look back from the most recent quarter when we evaluate your historicals. But the start and end date there gives you the ability to look back throughout your history while you're considering your analysis. So Steve, maybe just a quick second on that.
Yeah, I'm just changing a couple of the worms here so it's a little more dynamic. But so the question is about the look back periods. By default, So the duration or the length of a look back period is something that in a lot of other tools that we've seen out there in the marketplace is completely arbitrary. They just pick, they say, you know what, I'm going to use a 3-year look back or a 5-year or a 7-year look back for the entire portfolio, irrespective of different loan types having different average length, lives and durations and everything else. Intuitively, that didn't make a whole lot of sense to us. We took a little bit more of an advanced approach where we are customizing the length of a look back period for each segment of the portfolio based upon how long that life typically is. If you think about it, CECL is supposed to be capturing expected losses over the remaining lives of the assets. So the first thing that we do to do that is look at the past and see what would the past suggest our reserve needs to be over a lifetime. So if you're looking at a mortgage portfolio that has a 7, 8, 9-year average remaining life, you're probably going to want to look further into history to see how they have performed over a lifetime than you would need to do if you were evaluating a construction loan portfolio that turns over every 9 months. And if you're looking back 10 years for a 9-month duration portfolio, you're looking at 15 iterations of the entire portfolio, which seems like overkill. And so we match or mirror the look back periods to the warms. Now, an option that you have when you go to the historical detail tab here is that you can change what period you're looking at for your look back. So let's say for your credit card portfolio, it's got a 1-year warm, average remaining life. So we're looking at a 1-year period. Does it have to be the most recent 1-year period? No, it can be any 1-year period you want in history. If I wanted it to be, if I wanted to just be for the year 2021, I would say I want the look back period to end at the end of, I would say last year, but 2021. So I click on that and you'll see now we're still looking at a year. You see the blue highlighted area it shows us the look back period. It's still 1 year in duration. We're just using that year as opposed to the most recent 4 quarters. Lots of reasons you might do that. If you think this year was an aberration as far as your performance is concerned, if you had a recent charge off that let's say you had a completely clean portfolio for 7 years and you had one relationship with a borrower that you've been working with for a long time and you just decided a couple months ago you had to cut bait, you had to recognize a significant charge off in that portfolio. But once you do that, it's now part of your history, right? It's your historical loss analysis looks totally different because there's that one loss now taking up a huge space. If you decide or can justify that one loss was very non-recurring in nature and not indicative of what you expect moving forward, you can take it out of a look back period and say, hey, we think this period of the year before last was a much more typical period for us and more reflective of what we expect moving forward. And so you can take that look back period and shift it anywhere you want. Now, a little foreshadowing here, Sean. I don't like to do this, get people too excited too early, but this is one area that we are actively working on the tool to provide some additional enhancement. Right. The look back period, the duration of a look back period will always default to being the same as the warm. However, there are situations where you might have a long warm, a long remaining life, but only want to use a very short period as your look back period. Some additional math is required, right, to do that, to properly calculate a lifetime loss rate when using a short look back. But there are situations where that unique situations where that might make sense or be very helpful to do. So we're working right now on a way to have more flexibility in your look back periods, even if you don't want them to match the warm, which will always still be the default. So don't have an exact timeline on that, but sometime in the first half of this year, the next few months here, that will be an option for everybody to do that, which will, I think, just provide some additional flexibility. If you like it and understand it the way it is, you certainly do not need to change the way you're doing it. John?
Yeah,
Great.
I know Russell too had a comment with that. If you still have more questions, give us a holler. I'd be more than happy to walk you through that on your your scenario there. So,
all right. Let's see. We just had another. Oh, very good, Russell. Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks, Jason, for handling that. So let me, Steve. I think I'll probably take back the screen and get to the.
Or do you want me to jump into file upload real quick?
All right, go ahead and do that.
Since
You're
I'm sharing
right.
my screen.
Let's go
So
ahead and do that.
a
Yeah.
new, brand new enhancement to the tool, very excited, is a new tab right here called File Upload. This was just, again, directly from user input, from you guys calling us and telling us what you like and what you don't like and what you'd like to see the tool have that it doesn't. A lot of people said, just from an administrative standpoint, we'd like to be able to append or attach some other files to the tool so that when we look at our reserve, we've got everything in one spot. So whether it's your updated policy statement that you want to attach here so that you have access to it whenever you're looking at CECL, at your reserve calculation, or maybe it's a more drawn out narrative or explanation or justification of your qualitative factors. Maybe it's some more economic information that helps you with those Q factors, or it could just be your warm calculation, your loan level warm calculation for each for any particular scenario. You can now come and just attach any files you'd like, local files, PDFs, Word documents, Excel documents, drag and drop them, or go to your, just go right to your file system and click on a file, and you can make a note on why this is here and upload it, and boom. Now it's securely encrypted and saved up here on the tool. And you can access this file with any notes you've made on what the file is and why you've got it there. You can have general files that pertain to all your scenarios, like an updated policy statement. You can also have scenario specific ones. So if I save this new scenario as a new scenario, now I can upload files directly just for this one scenario. So I do that and I'll upload it. So you can have scenario specific files and institution general files, and you can add and remove them at will. Just again, this doesn't update any other parts of the tool. If you're doing your warm calculations, your loan level data in an Excel file, and then you upload it here, it doesn't take that data from the file and somehow update the rest of the interactive tool. This is just a repository for any other supporting documents that you'd like to attach and keep right here administratively. Sean?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Steve. All right, so let me take back the screen here
Sure.
and pull up the PowerPoint again. And while that's going,
I can see it.
Yeah, here we go. Let me, let's try to get, whoops. So here was again, we've listed out the calculation, the audit sample. Here again is a slide on the document upload. The other area where I think many of you may have seen some enhancements is to our warm estimator. Again, a couple of things here. When we first designed the tool, our approach was to be as conservative as possible, which almost by definition means a longer warm period, because if you're evaluating losses over a longer period of time, that would potentially suggest a greater opportunity to aggregate more net charge-offs. However, as we've gotten more users on this, the requests came in that some institutions felt like this was not their warm was maybe too long. And so Steve did some research. We talked to a number of institutions. We came up with a couple of other ways to present the warm. All three of them are actually, can be appropriate. It's really about the level of detail or just kind of your approach to what you want to do here. And Steve, you want to go ahead and, talk about this?
So, surprise, surprise, just like everywhere else in CECL, there's subjectivity in the warm calculations. The warm calculation is an extremely, it's a critical input. Just they don't call it the warm method for nothing, but no matter what methodology you're using, your determination of how long your portfolio lasts, what the remaining life of it is going to be a huge assumption and have a huge impact on what your reserve needs to be. And so looking at it, we talk with a lot of institutions and auditing firms, but we also talk with the NCUA themselves and about the warm values that we were seeing and some of the really long and drawn out warm calculations that people were coming up with based upon a conservative methodology for it. And we were able to, in conjunction with them, get more comfortable with the more, some more aggressive methodologies for for calculating the WARM, ones that take into account, appropriately take into account amortization in a way that brings those WARMs down, right? And so the big change here is the ability to add either loan level amortization assumptions into the WARM calculation, or just some universal portfolio level, if you don't want to get too detailed and granular, amortization assumptions that all have the general effect of bringing those WARMs, making them shorter and making your reserve a little bit lower. For those of you who are looking to get a little bit more aggressive, then this is a great way to do that, still completely within the acceptable bounds of FASB and the NCUA. So what you see here is the summary page of our Excel-based WARM estimator tool. It used to have just one column, right? Or it just showed what the WARM calculation was based upon the single way to calculate it. Now we've got a few different options, a few different ways depending upon how aggressive you want to be. And we got a lot of this data from the NCUA in October. Actually finally provided some good, decent, worthwhile, helpful guidance as it pertains not only to prepayment assumptions, which is a critical input in calculating your WARM accurately, is what sort of prepayments do you expect, and one that's very difficult to simply have on hand if you're a typical credit union. And so we had given some guidance over the last year or so as to what you might want to use for your prepayment assumptions to begin with. By default, by looking at things like the FHFA's quarterly prepayment monitoring report that they put out, which has a lot of good data on mortgage related loans and prepayment speeds that are typical throughout the industry. And then looking at the some resources from the Fed that that helps on calculating prepayment speeds for non-mortgage related items. But the NCUA is a little bit more of a direct source for you guys, for sure. And they did a study of credit unions around the country, credit unions under $100 million around the country, just to be clear, and looked at their loan level data across all of them, because they had that data, and did some calculations on prepayment speeds and gave that as some guidance as a starting point, which was great. They did the same thing with the WARM calculations. The overall, and these WARM calculations are completely peer-based, do not take into account your information at all, just looking at across the industry for small, medium credit unions, what some of the average WARMs they were seeing based on that. So we integrated all that data. We said, this is a time for us to kind of come up with an enhanced version of our WARM estimator that takes into account the new fresh guidance from the NCUA on prepayments and WARMs, to make sure that the WARMs that you guys are calculating are in line with, and just we're not shooting ourselves in the foot. We're not calculating a 12-year WARM when it could probably be 7 years and still be okay as far as the NCUA is concerned. So if you like the WARMs you're calculating, if you're not trying to get more aggressive, if you're comfortable with the levels you have, you don't need to do anything differently. The way you've been doing it is still completely appropriate and a little bit more conservative. But again, a couple alternatives here that are a little more aggressive. So this is the summary page. If you go to the next slide, Sean, this will be the detailed. Yeah, this is the detailed page for each in our WARM estimator tool. Each segment has its own tab, and this presents 3 different ways of calculating the WARM. The top left is the more conservative method that we've always had on here, which simply does an unadjusted WARM and then adjusts for a prepayment assumption. Below that takes into account amortization, but on a portfolio basis. So just a simple straight line amortization assumption across all your loans in the bucket, and that will bring that WARM down a decent amount if you want to use that assumption. And then on the top right is actual loan level amortization assumptions. If you really want to get granular and go through the whole bucket for each segment and make some assumptions about balloon payments and amortizing status of each loan, you can do that, and then it'll recalculate and give you a more detailed amortization and prepayment adjusted WARM calculation. So I know that's a lot to swallow right there that I just threw out there. Again, if you like the way you're doing it, still totally appropriate, can still do so. But for those of you who are looking to get those WARMs down and don't mind going through this, this is an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, Jason, anything you want to add there?
No, that's
Okay.
good.
Yeah, and I think that's the important point. I mean, really, it's all about choices, right? There's no one right or wrong way to do it. It's really the best fit for how you kind of see your portfolio. Again, our initial bias as a provider was to be conservative. However, as Steve touched on, right, many of you, because of the fact that that suggests potentially a higher reserve amount, many of you wanted something that was more, more maybe closely resembled what you've been, type of look backs you've been using in the ALLL. These, alternative ways of calculating it will reduce the WARM and, theoretically potentially lower the reserve required. So again, all about choices, all about how, you and your credit union approach the reserve process.
Would you guys recommend sticking with like one or the other, or can they dance around a little bit between?
I would suggest probably sticking with one methodology for each of this, for all of the segments, because every time you make a subjective decision, you've got to have some justification for it.
Yeah.
If you've made 15 different choices just for methodology, just for the WARM, just for, then you got to have, like, why did you choose differently for this segment? You're gonna, you get points for paper, but you need to have that paper for every decision you've made. So it just seems to be that would be overly complex. And just, full disclosure, the initial methodology we had chosen, which is certainly more conservative, was one that had been thoroughly vetted with the NCUA. We worked with them in developing it in the first place, and they were very comfortable with it. We probably wouldn't have been comfortable with all these other slightly more aggressive methodologies had the NCUA not come out with some of this additional guidance last October, which really kind of drove home their comfort level with lower WARMs.
Yeah,
So,
and I think, Jason, to your question, right? I think Steve answered it, right? The best way is that I don't think you're tied to one methodology, but if you do start mixing and matching, you almost inevitably open yourself up to the question of why did you do it? So if you have the information to support, it might be one bucket within there that maybe, acts differently, that you want to treat it differently, that's fine. But I think you always have to be prepared for why if you do something like that. The next slide is around, again, Steve touched on these, the NCUA really kind of stepping in and providing some prepay speed and some, WARM numbers. And so again, this was helpful, but it clearly spurred more conversation around our own, standard way of calculating the WARM, and really was, a little bit of the catalyst for what came next. Steve, anything you want to add there about that?
And this will be the NCUA has promised to continue to update this analysis on a quarterly basis. And so as soon as they update it, our WARM estimator tool that we have on the tool will on the site will also update. So if you're updating your WARMs on a quarterly basis, and you're using the same spreadsheet each quarter and then just resaving it, you might, every once in a while, you're going to want to check, re-download a new version of it just to make sure that there haven't been any significant changes. If you're using this guidance, right? If you are taking into account, if the prepayment speed you're using is the one coming from the NCUA, you will want to check our tool quarterly to see how much that's changed. Instead of, because I know the WARM estimator tool is a separate Excel file. It's not dynamically connected, once you start using it. You'll want to check that each quarter to see if anything's changed significantly.
Yeah, or if you're calculating your own and struggle with prepayments, this is great. You can just use these guys here. So
yeah, exactly.
They're not going to have a lot of pushback if you're using their own numbers, especially when they know how difficult it can be to get and how assumption laden a prepayment speed a historical prepayment speed that's supposed to reflect estimated future prepayments can be.
Thank you. We did have a question come in about the handouts. We will be attaching the handouts, the link to the recording, and those new policy templates, when we send out the follow-up email.
And if it's not on the tool already at the top, so look there.
Correct. Yeah. And then you can certainly, email into Jason or David. So again, we want to make sure we're sensitive to any other questions that might be on your mind right now. Go ahead and please submit those. While we wait for any more, just a reminder that these coffee talks will continue. Our next one will be in February. We still are going to do a demo We've had, still some institutions who are just getting started. So we want to make sure we're sensitive to making sure we get everybody to the finish line. So we will continue those again here in February. We will, our plan is to continue to run the coffee talks all the way through the year. We're going to bring back, some of our experts, such as Paul Allen throughout the year. Please share any thoughts or topics you'd like us to discuss. But, I think the year as we move forward, we'll focus more about just, as we get more information, making the process easier, share best practices from what we're hearing from you. And again, just try to make it as inclusive to helping everybody, manage this transition as best we can. I'm not seeing any additional questions. Any final comments from you, Steve or Jason?
Yeah, I mean, my thing was too, I had a conversation with another kind of a credit union there, 107 million. They're like, hey, can we use the NCUA stuff? And I would have to think, yes, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a slice of community-based institutions across America. It seemed like just because it stops at 100 million doesn't mean, okay, no, it's so different there. I mean, I think it's still got to be relevant for.
Yeah,
most of them.
while I don't know, well, I can never tell you what the
Say it's
NCUA is
yeah.
thinking.
What
Wish I
loans they're
could.
using. Yeah.
But I don't know why they why the study that they did stopped at 100 million and they didn't consider, probably because they were paying some third party to do the study, and the larger of a study, the more it would cost them. I don't know. But there's nothing, inherently uniquely different about a $150 million credit union that wouldn't pertain to a $90 million credit union as it pertains to things like prepayment speeds on loan portfolios and average remaining life of that's really based upon the loan type. And they did this by loan type. So a mortgage portfolio for a $90 million bank shouldn't really have, just because it becomes a $150 million credit union doesn't mean I would think that the prepayment assumptions or average remaining life calculations would be anything different.
Yeah.
Now, a $10 billion credit union may have just a completely different business model and look for loans with and have different durations and have different prepayments and everything else. But I think it's pretty applicable to the entire industry, and it's probably your best data you're ever going to get to go on outside of doing your own complete internal prepayment study, which would still be rife with a bunch of assumptions. Over what period are you calculating historical prepayments? Do you think that's going to be the same going forward? And so I really like that NCUA data and I think everyone should be using it as a starting point for those prepayment assumptions. Because it's easy, it's there, it's pretty relevant, and it's coming directly from your regulator.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think the way I've always positioned it with any of the institutions that are working with us is right. I think all the regulators recognize that, the smaller the institutions, the more difficult it is to do additional research, right? So they always want to, where they can, provide some reasonable and supportable numbers, right? And that's really at the heart of any assumption, particularly within CECL around WARMs or Q factors or even, prepayment assumptions, right? Reasonable and supportable. So it's certainly reasonable and supportable with real data, right? So I think it gives you a leg up. And then, as Steve mentioned, if you have the wherewithal or the curiosity and you think it's worth the extra time, effort, and energy, you can do things on your own. But I think for most of us, that's a reasonable and supportable determination of what the WARM and prepayment speeds, probably should be. We did have another question come in. Would like to understand how others are determining Q factors and adjustment to an already calculated reserve. Are people using ranges of adjustments given a change in a particular Q factor, such as an economic change for unemployment? Again, here, I'll give you my thoughts, and then I'll let Steve and Jason share and any of the audience as well. But, again, I think Q factors are something that are, inherently unique to all of us, right? I think there's certainly broad economic characteristics that we want to be sensitive to and certainly impact us. But also, our makeup of our borrowers at our credit union, the economy in our local area, right? Those are going to probably be most sensitive. At our institution, we always talk about things that keep us up at night. when we think about our Q factors. What would really cause some, heartburn or indigestion? And that typically is around, employers, right, in our area. Impacts, we're an ag community, any kind of, something to that particular industry. So I think Q factors are really a way to start broad and come closer, based on your own institution. And so I think I'm always a big believer in being directionally accurate, right? So unemployment, I'm not too concerned about how the level of unemployment is, but if it perhaps changes, right? I mean, we're at record lows for unemployment. So if it went up a little bit, it's probably going to bother me, but we're still at 3.5% unemployment. So the level is probably not as important as the fact that we might be changing and trending in another direction. Now, but within that, then, does that affect the consumer faster? Sure. So I think it's a best efforts, right? But I think it is unique to every institution.
And I would like to share my screen for just a second again,
Yeah.
Sean.
Show
to
the Q
speak-
factor
to speak
matrix.
to that.
there.
Yeah. Let's see, share screen. Oh, give me one more second.
You know.
Now I can
Yeah,
share. screen.
you should be able to share now, Steve.
Yep. I got it now. All right.
There you go.
So this is the home base, so to speak, for Q factors, right? Within the tool itself. This is where you come, you look at these trends, you see what your historical loss rate is, and you make all those plus or minus qualitative factor adjustments based upon, peer economic conditions, lending policies, all those suggested factors from the interagency guidance and everything else. We want it, but this doesn't, obviously, this allows you to plug those in. The question being, what about, magnitude and direction of changes? This doesn't provide a framework for what levels of changes we should be making. It provides a framework for doing the calculation. So what we wanted to do was help you provide a framework that you could customize and work within to justify a little additional risk, maybe 10 basis points for all those things where we think there's slightly more risk. For significantly more risk, that might mean a larger adjustment. So what we did in our CECLSolver resources, we have a new-ish, I think we showed this last month or the month before, called our Q factor determination support matrix. That's a mouthful. We need an acronym for that, Sean. I'm going to open that up for just a second, and this may be helpful. This may not, but for those of you who haven't seen it, I think you should see it. It's an Excel file. It's one that you can download and use as you see fit. It's just a way to say, hey, let's define, what some of these changes are and how these Q factors work. So you can come in here and you can, let's say a score is -1 is less risky, and then 0 is no change in risk, and 1, 2, or 3 is escalating risk. What you can decide on a lower high end of the range, or what kind of Q factor adjustment constitutes a slightly additional risk. And then you can kind of just go through your different loan segments and give them some scores, where you just plug in some scores or plug in some adjustments and it rescores. So this tool you can totally customize if you want to plug in scores instead of adjustments, or adjustments instead of scores, and have the other recalculate. You can modify, you can play with it, do what you need with it. But we thought this would at least provide some sort of an initial framework where you can start thinking about that. So this is all marked up just to tell you how to use it. And then this is not marked up at all. So you can come in here and, if you add a large adjustment, if you add a small adjustment, and then you can make notes on what those additional, lower risk, higher risk, and what that means. So again, this is just a framework, but we thought it could be helpful to have this as well. So feel free to utilize
and now
that.
you can upload that to your scenario too.
You certainly could. If you'd like to use that and you want to use it and update it each quarter, do that, and then you go right to your scenario and upload it, so it's attached right there. And when you're looking at your Q factors and your narrative and justification for it, you can go right there and pull you up side by side.
Yeah, and I think again, it gives you a consistent frame of reference, and again, you can make the adjustments, based on your own.
Yeah.
Is it okay to use current delinquency as a Q factor? Of course, right? I think again, directionally, increases to your current delinquency, right, or vice versa, may impact how you think about those. So absolutely, you can use something like that.
Yeah, Q factors are, so the first step of CECL is our historical experience, right? That ends at some point in history. How far back in history depends on the lag time between quarters. but Q factors are defined as any changes or difference in current and future conditions. So if your, delinquent loans are 30 to 89 days past due or whatever they are historically low or have notched up from what, they were last quarter end, then that's a perfect justification for a slight increase Q factor based solely on that. And you can, if it doesn't fit any of these suggested Q factors, you come right in here and add, increase or change in current delinquencies, right? And then you can add in adjustments based upon that.
Yeah, and it's not just like, hey, I have delinquencies, let me add in adjustments. It's, what percentage more or less than it is from your historic.
Right. Everything is relative to what our historical, the starting point is not zero. The starting point is our historical experience, and then plus or minus modifiers to it. That's what Q factors are.
I have
Modifiers.
which I don't know. Sometimes too, Tracy, I know you're a smaller credit union, so it's sometimes harder when you have no historic losses, and then to try to make those adjustments can be a little bit more difficult.
That's when you need that's where this is so great and helpful and critical is when we did this analysis for everybody, right? When we're doing that historical analysis and looking at all that data over all those look back periods, we're doing it for every single other credit union in the country in the background simultaneously. So crunching gazillions of numbers so that we can do that entire historical analysis for your peers and average it out and get an apples to apples comparison. So you can say, listen, even if I don't have any loss history in my mortgage portfolio over the last decade, I certainly can't reserve zero for it. And I have to justify whatever non-zero value I put it there, but I can't do it based upon my own loss history. You can say, well, I didn't stop there. I went and I analyzed every mortgage loan in my entire market and for other similar sized credit unions and looked at what's happening outside my four walls in the environment around me for guidance when my historical internal documents or experience didn't get the job done. So it's really great to be able to utilize those call reports and all that historical information on apples to apples segment in order to be able to do that and justify it.
So their question came in about how long will it take to get the new call report information for our credit union? Ours was approved on Wednesday this week. So the day after you file, your numbers get updated.
The day after it gets into and through their system.
Correct.
And I don't know what on a day-to-day basis exactly when that happens, but if you'd filed and it was if it's on the NCUA's system now, then it should, when you pull up a new scenario. So if you pull up an old scenario, it's not going to have your new balances here because that scenario was frozen in time for when you did it. You don't want old scenarios to be updating automatically. Otherwise, you don't have any historical integrity for your reserve calculations, right? But anytime you start a new scenario, after you filed, these current balances right here will be updated with your current ones. Will all the historical and peer data? No, because not everyone's filed yet. However, everyone will have filed by sometime or and it'll be in the system by early next week. So at some point next week, the entire system, if not Monday, at some point during the week, will shift, and then 12/31 will be available across the entire industry.
Yeah. So summary page updates as soon as you file or as soon as that data processes, and later on, once we have everyone's, it'll all upload the entirety of the history. So
these guys, have. This is a larger credit union in Wisconsin. They have filed a few days ago, I think, and so their 12/31 values are up here, even though none of the peer stuff is yet.
Do we send out emails notifying that it's all been updated? We did last time.
We do. Yeah, we do.
Anyway.
We don't send one that says that you filed, but we do send one that says everyone's filed and the entire tool is updated for all the peer data and the historical calculation.
And typically, right, 2/1 by 2/1, 2/2, we should have those, right?
Yeah, you don't have to wait for the email. It's after the month end, like whatever the beginning of the next week is, it's there. It should be.
Yeah.
If it's not, you can call us and complain. Call Jason and complain. No.
Say that to Steve, please.
No. No one's taking ownership here, Jason.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. Again, just a reminder, we will be back in February certainly reach out to us, look for the emails, not only about the link to today's presentation, but also that'll include those policy templates. We will send out an email next week when the data is updated, just as a reminder. But again, as Steve and Jason said, you don't need to wait on that. But anything in the interim, let us know how we can help. Any final comments, Jason and Steve, before we let folks back to their day?
Keep pushing. It's there.
And keep joining us for these, if you enjoyed it today. Hopefully you all did. But again, each month, as people are really neck deep in it now and making those day one adjustments and asking questions of their auditors, and we're getting all the accountants and auditors involved across the industry, we're going to be getting an onslaught of information about things that they like, things they don't like, things that were expected or unexpected about the rollout. And we'll talk about all that stuff on our coffee talks as we move through the year this year.
Yeah, it's going to be a big evolution. So
yeah, that sounds good. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a great weekend, and we will catch you again next month. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Good night.